Hello guys, thank you so much for joining me for another FIFA 23 Tactics tutorial video. I'm Ash or Brommer18, and if you're new to the channel, welcome along. Make sure to hit the subscribe button down below and ring the bell to get notifications every time I upload. I think you'll find lots of the content we do here very helpful. Today, we are going to discuss Catenaccio. Yes, that's right, for the first time on this channel, I'm going to give you guys a tutorial on how to make a true Catenaccio tactic, at least within the restrictions and the restraints of the gameplay itself. I want to talk about the formation. We've very much been inspired by Helenio Herrera's Inter tactics of course, the 60s. And so we are going to lean towards that one today. There are lots of different variations of Catenaccio. We're also going to talk about the positions. As you can see, very, very different to anything you've probably seen before with regard to these positions. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the best tactics to use and also the best player instructions. Just quickly want to say before we do get into it, if you haven't done so already, you want to access lots of fantastic perks and rewards, and a great way to support the channel is by checking out my Patreon. On there you can get access to exclusive tactics videos that you'll only find on Patreon. You won't find them on YouTube, as well as my FIFA 23 custom tactics package where we rank and rate every system that we do cover on the channel. On top of that, there's Discord server access, there's Fantasy Football League access, there's early access to videos, behind the scenes videos, and a whole lot more. With that being said, let's talk about Catenaccio. Now, recently I did actually upload a video on how to do a defensive tactic, the best tips and tricks to make a defensive tactic. Now, some of you watching may be thinking, well, are they not the same thing? No, they are definitely not the same thing. There are very, very huge differences between a general defensive tactic, parking the bus if you will, and a Catenaccio system, and we're going to go through them today. The principles of a Catenaccio tactic are: one, it's about man marking. It's a heavily orientated man marking system, and so you need players to be manning up all over the pitch if possible. Two, it's about this guy right here. In this case, we have a Cherby, that central centre-back. He's there to be a sweeper. He's there to be behind that defensive line. And the principle of particularly Helenio Herrera's Catenaccio system was, let's say you've got the 4-4-2. Let's take a midfielder out of that, plonk him in the defence as a sweeper. So he's just behind the kind of back line, and he can not only kind of sweep up over the top through balls and loose balls, etc., protect that back line, but also he's there as a ball playing defender. I've used this kind of comparison before, but think of kind of like Connor Cody for Wolves as that kind of not only the sweeper but also the ball playing centre back. And that's the reason why we've got a Cherby here, because his passing stats are actually the best amongst all of the Inter Milan defenders. So that's why we've gone with that. Obviously, there are different versions of Catenaccio. We've obviously focused on Helenio Herrera's kind of Inter tactics. There were some where you kind of have the 4 defenders, and instead one of those 4 kind of reverts back to a sweeper. But obviously, that's quite risky, particularly in FIFA. I think it's much better with the 5, and obviously we've seen the kind of success that Herrera did have. So let's talk about the positions then. As you can see, we've obviously got these 3 centre-backs. We've got 2 full-backs. I think you're better off having these as full-backs rather than wing-backs, although we will talk about how attacking they were a little bit later on. You'll also notice this. We've actually got 3 defensive midfielders. I'll talk more about this in the player instructions as to why we do this, but it's very much about the player instructions that we can set. So all of these guys are on defensive midfield. You've obviously got a left defensive midfielder, a right one, and a centre one as well. And remember that you will need to kind of move these centre-backs out the way a little bit so that you can fit these guys in. Otherwise, it will force them to kind of be a central midfielder. So that's just something that you should also note. So as you can see, a lot of men back, a lot of defensive midfielders. To have 3 defensive midfielders and 3 centre-backs is unheard of in this game. And it's very much got those defensive principles in play. But it wasn't just about that. So let's talk about the tactics. Well, starting off defensively, naturally the defensive style is going to be drop back, and that's what you're looking for. I would actually avoid something even along the lines of balance, because that will merge the likes of pressure on heavy touch, and really you don't have the setup for positions that you would like to have any kind of press. 3 defensive midfielders and 5 defenders, how are you really going to get those guys pushing up the field? It just doesn't really lend itself to that. So you're going to want drop back. Naturally, you want to couple that with a low defensive line as well, a low block. We've got 20 here. Anything under 30 will do absolutely fine, and that's how you are going to cut out a lot of those balls behind. But if you don't, then of course you've got this sweeper right here, and that's part of his role. The width again is ultimately up to you. I thought we could go a little bit wider this time, so we got this on 40 because of how many players you kind of got, you know, condensed into that narrow central area. And then attacking wise, this is where things really change. With the defensive system that we was talking about in one of the recent videos, we didn't necessarily have a specific one. We said you'd probably want to avoid the likes of possession. You could go direct, you could go forward runs. With build-up play, you could really go a whole lot of ways that you want to. With Catenaccio, and particularly if we look at Helenio Herrera's Catenaccio for Inter, it was very much, yes, we want to get numbers back to defend, but we want to hit teams at dangerous, quick transitions, fast counter-attacks, and that's what we're looking for here. So the build-up play should be on fast build-up, and the chance creation should be on forward runs. Now, for any of you who kind of glance at the gameplay every so often, you'll notice that the chance creation for me originally was direct passing. At half time, I changed this to forward runs, and it was much better. Much, much better. The problem with direct passing is that players really aren't going to make that movement. They're going to just generally be ready to take the ball in their position. With forward runs, you're going to get the likes of the strikers, maybe the fullbacks in this system, bombing forward more and showing for the ball. And that's very, very important that you're hitting teams with those quick transitions. And the fact that you've got the likes of 3 defensive midfielders and 3 centre-back will cover you with the likes of fast build-up, where it says you could be open to a counter-attack. Trust me, you probably won't with this system. Moving on to these elements of the tactic, the width, again, very much up to you. I decided to stretch this to 80 because of the fact that it's a very narrow system. You want to get the likes of the attackers and the fullbacks really stretching out more and exploiting that space as much as possible. With the players in the box, keep this on the lower end. The likes of the strikers and maybe the fullback and one of the defensive midfielder might get in there, but that's really it. You don't want too many players committing. You want to protect yourself from those attacking transitions on the counter-attack from the opposition. So really only keep this at a maximum of 5 or 6 and anything below that. Corners and free kicks, I actually had both of these on free, again just giving yourself a bit more protection. You will notice though on free that at least one of the centre-backs won't get into the box or the corners, and you might find that a little bit frustrating. So you may choose to up that to 4 if you so wish, but I personally kept it on 3 for the principle of the system. Now let's talk about the player instructions. This is where we're really going to get into the meat of this. Now, obviously, the central centre-back is the sweeper. He's the one who is on the cover and playing behind that defensive line. Very tough to replicate on this game, but there are ways we can kind of get it going. So first things first, with the central centre-back, have him on conservative interceptions. So he's not going to be stepping out pretty much at any point. And then these other 2, you want to stick to position and stay back whilst attacking. Now with these wide centre-backs, it's very different. The interceptions on aggressive interceptions and defensive position is on step up. Obviously, they're going to be tracking players. That's playing into the whole man-marking element that we spoke about earlier. That's the principle of a Catenaccio. It's a heavily man-marking orientated system. So these guys will do that with the step-up tactic. And aggressive interceptions, again, they're likely to just push up out of position to try and win the ball. So that's how we're separating this sweeper from the rest of the back line, because these guys hopefully stepping up, following their runners, looking to win the ball back aggressively, whereas he's kind of holding back a little bit more. And that, with regards to the defensive positioning, is also the same for the fullbacks as well. We want them to step up so that they're basically in the line with each other. So you've got the 2 fullbacks and the 2 centre-backs, and then the central centre-back should be hopefully behind them. That's the best way we can try and recreate that. We also want to talk about the attacking runs and the run type. You want both of these fullbacks getting forward. Again, like I say, Catenaccio, very different to just an out-and-out park the bus defensive system. They have game plan to score, and part of that was these fast counter-attacks and these guys creating the width. These fullbacks were a huge part of that attacking game plan. For example, Jacinto Facchetti, the left back for Inter, during that Helenio Herrera era, he actually held the record for a long time until Marco Materazzi broke it in the early 2000s for the most goals scored by a defender in a single season. Such was the way in which they were a huge part of their attacking game plan, and they were encouraged to get forward. So it's not just about defending in this Catenaccio system. Let's talk about this central midfield next then. In this situation, I've got 3 defensive midfielders. maybe you might choose to move this central centre midfielder or defensive midfielder to central midfield from defensive midfield, just for the sake of attacking. That's really entirely down to you, but I've decided to keep them all at defensive midfield as a way of making this as solid as possible. The most important thing is that defensive behaviour is on man mark, as we've spoken about already, and I'm sorry to repeat this just one more time, a heavily man marking system. That's why we have all these guys at defensive midfield rather than central midfield, because it allows us to set the instructions to man mark. Now the problem with man mark in FIFA 23 is that once the opposition get into the box, these players will then ignore that. They won't trap those runs. But outside of the area, they do a fairly good job of man marking, and you'll notice this because their stamina will really decrease at a slightly higher rate than it would if they didn't have man mark on. With regards to these instructions, I personally decided to have the 2 wide defensive midfielders on stay back whilst attacking, and then the central one on get forward to help support those attacks. Something else you might want to note is that the position freedom for the wide defensive midfielders is on drift wide. What would often happen is that the fullbacks would go on forward, and then the wide kind of central midfielders, the position was a little bit different then. These guys would fill in for them, and that's what we're really looking for there, which is another reason why obviously it's helpful to have them as left and right defensive midfield. With the 2 strikers, you can really go about this any way you prefer. They kind of had a hybrid half false winger in this team, and I tried to really go with that with Martinez, where I had him on drift wide, but then I had him on false 9. And what this does is it does a really good job of linking the strikers with the midfield, because obviously he'll drop off into those pockets of space, and with those 3 defensive midfielders you're going to notice a huge gap if you don't try and fill it in somehow. I also got him to come back on defence as well, whereas Lukaku, he was very much the one who was playing on the last man and looking to get in behind as much as possible. So then, that just about rounds it off for this video. Been really fun to get into this Catenaccio one. Some people have kind of suggested it, and I really want to thank you guys for making that suggestion, because I think it's been a really good idea. Actually something I quite enjoyed playing with as well. So you guys should give it a try. See what you do. Maybe you kind of mix up these roles and tactics a little bit. Feel free. Do as you wish. It's entirely down to you. Mix up the kind of teams you're using, etc., and let me know how it goes. Really enjoyed covering this, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as well. If you found this helpful, make sure to drop a like on the video, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to get notifications every time I upload. And the best way to absolutely support the channel outside of course, watching videos is to check me out on Patreon and give me a follow or subscription or whatever it is on there. Pledge to me, I guess it is, and you'll get lots of fantastic perks and rewards that I think you guys will really enjoy. Don't forget to check out all the other content on my channel. We've got real tactics replications, we've got tactics tutorials, I've hopefully got some shorts coming your way for career mode, got a whole range of different things, and obviously my video games podcast. If you want your video games fixed, that is a great way to do it, so check out the links down below for that. With that being said, we are going to finish it there. Thank you so much for watching, and until the next one, I will see you soon.